Tonight, the mother of two boys found dead in their Blue Mountains home, charged with domestic violence-related murder. Scam crackdown. Banks, telcos and tech companies told to protect customers or face huge fines. Russia launches a counter-offensive in Kursk, claiming it's started to recapture territory. And the Power hold off a late charge from the Hawks, prevailing in a thrilling do-or-die semi-final in Adelaide. This is ABC Late News. Hello, I'm Craig Smart. The mother of two boys who were allegedly stabbed to death in their Blue Mountains home has been charged with murder. Emergency services have been called to a home in the area west of Sydney after a welfare report on Tuesday. Police will allege that the bodies of two boys, aged 9 and 11, were found inside the home by their father. The 42-year-old woman was also found with allegedly self-inflicted stab wounds. She was taken to hospital under police guard in a critical but stable condition. Police said the woman was released from hospital on Friday and taken to a police station and charged with 2 counts of domestic violence-related murder. She's been refused bail and will appear in court on Saturday. Tech companies, banks and telcos could face massive fines if they fail to protect their customers from scams. They'll also be up for compensation to victims under new laws proposed by the Albanese government.
Just weeks before buying his first property, Ilya Fomin lost $280,000 to a scam.
It was such a huge shock, you do not feel much.
Criminals stole his money after they emailed him impersonating his lawyer. He believes the two banks used to shift the funds could have done more.
They didn't check neither the address nor the name, and they just let the money go.
His bank maintains it did nothing wrong.
I believe that if our people had seen those red flags, they absolutely would not have processed the payment.
Banks will have to ensure that they are confirming the identity of a payee when a transfer is being made.
With Australians losing billions every year, the government is demanding action from banks, telcos and tech companies.
We'll ensure that Australia is leading the world in the fight against scams.
New obligations will cover how to prevent, detect, report, disrupt and respond. If companies fail, they could be forced to pay compensation and fined up to $50 million. The banks pushed hard to have other sectors on the hook. Telcos will have to combat dodgy texts and calls, and digital platforms verify advertisers. Both will also be liable.
It's more likely to prevent scams from ever starting, and it's a much fairer way of attributing liability.
Consumer groups have reacted positively, but are pushing to ensure most victims are repaid.
A model that incentivises businesses to fortify their systems and protect their customers.
Key details, including exactly what this means for future scam victims, is still being worked out. But despite that, the government wants to pass the laws this year. Michael Atkin, ABC News.
An inquiry into the unlawful robo-debt scheme has found that a dozen public servants breached their code of conduct 97 times. The Public Service Commissioner has made findings against 12 current and former staff, with sanctions imposed against 4 who remain employed with the department. The Commissioner says former Department Secretary Catherine Campbell failed to seek legal advice and created a culture that prevented robo-debt being scrutinised. The report also made findings against former Secretary Renee Leon, who is now the Vice-Chancellor of Charles Sturt University. The robo-debt scandal led to $1.7 billion in debt being unlawfully collected from millions of social security recipients.
The vast majority of public servants are good people, working hard to serve you, the community, every day. Public servants made mistakes. We can't change what happened, but we can learn from it and work together to make sure those mistakes won't happen again.
The WA government has confirmed it won't be introducing legislation to ban gay conversion practices until after next year's state election. Some advocates say they're feeling ignored, warning the harmful practices need to be stopped.
A promise to Parliament in 2022.
The McGowan government will be introducing legislation to outlaw and make a crime conversion therapy.
Legislation that won't be delivered in this term of government. The practice is based on the idea that a person's sexual orientation or gender identity can be changed, suppressed or eradicated through practices ranging from psychiatric treatments to spiritual intervention. Advocates feel stamping it out needs to be a higher priority.
It's obviously disappointing and we advocate for these reforms to go through because they're much needed.
Anglican priest and conversion reform advocate Chris Betting understands the reform will come at the end of next year and says it can't be rushed.
It is absolutely critical that we get this legislation right the first time. And the way to do that is with a survivor-led approach.
Gay conversion practices have been outlawed across most of the country, with South Australia the latest state to introduce legislation. WA and Tasmania are the only states that haven't acted. The Australian Christian Lobby says legislation isn't needed.
The issue with conversion therapy is that those who are advocating for it, they don't want it limited just to coercive measures, but even simply hearing someone express a view different to their own. They sometimes classify that as being exposed to conversion therapy.
The state government says it's still committed to banning conversion practices, but has run out of time to deal with the issue before Parliament rises for the year. Andrew Williams, ABC News, Albany.
It's been described as a once-in-a-generation reform for aged care, allowing more people access to support at home. But some older Australians are fearful that they won't be able to afford the care they need to live independently.
Sue Watts lives alone in the suburbs of Hobart, but twice a week the 70-year-old gets a helping hand from a support worker.
For services such as domestic cleaning and help to get to medical appointments.
Home care packages allow people like Sue to maintain independence at home rather than rely on residential care.
If I didn't have them, I'd feel really lost and alone. I don't have a lot of family to support me.
But the home care system is under severe strain, with a growing wait list of more than 60,000 people.
I know of a case at the moment of a 95-year-old woman who is being told she's going to have to wait a year just to be assessed. At 95, she doesn't have a year to wait.
The federal government has now unveiled a multi-billion-dollar reform package to expand access to an extra 300,000 people over the next decade. Home care packages involve three types of service categories: clinical care such as nursing and physiotherapy, support for independence like respite and transport, and everyday living including cleaning, meals delivery and gardening. Under the proposed Support at Home scheme, recipients wouldn't have to contribute any funds for clinical care, but the other categories would be means tested, meaning a part pensioner would pay between 5 and 50% of independence services, while a self-funded retiree would cover 80% of everyday living services. A no worse off principle would apply for those already receiving support, but some new recipients would have to contribute thousands of dollars each year.
And the reality is we do have people who are utilising aged care that do have significant super balances, who do have assets.
There's not enough information. I don't know, I'm really scared. I don't know how much more I'm going to have to find.
The government wants the reforms in place by mid-next year. Jono Gibson, ABC News.
The Defence Minister is being accused of throwing lower-ranked army officers under the bus with his decision to strip medals over alleged murders in Afghanistan. Richard Marles is standing by the move. Here's Defence correspondent Andrew Green.
An anti-war protester cements her arm to a car and blocks the entrance to Melbourne's Kingsway Bridge.
Will be abolished.
Police eventually chisel her free. One of several activists still trying to disrupt a weapons fair where the Defence Minister was today the VIP guest.
Difficult decisions require leadership. That's what I've done as the Minister for Defence.
Attending the International Land Forces Expo,
they're all high explosive as well.
Richard Marles defends his decision this week to strip several army officers of medals for alleged Afghanistan war crimes that occurred under their command.
Well, why is it okay to throw sort of lower ranked diggers under the bus, but those who are higher up the chain avoid any scrutiny?
The former Defence Minister turned opposition leader also attacking the timing of the long-awaited announcement so soon after the Veteran Suicide Royal Commission.
I think Richard Marles really has done a great disservice here to the Australian Defence Force.
Whenever we were doing it, it was going to be a difficult moment.
With the three-day weapons convention now finished, the government has taken aim at those who've used violence in the protests outside, describing their actions as utterly unacceptable. Today, anti-war activists were joined by a Greens senator.
I'd say to Richard Marles, have the courage and come out and speak to the people who vote for you, not the multinationals who you want a job from when you leave politics.
This year, we have watched the Greens throw their lot in with thuggery time and time again.
And he insists those in the weapons trade are actually keeping every Australian safe. Andrew Green, ABC News, Melbourne.
Ukraine says Russia has begun a counter-offensive, taking back territory after Kyiv's cross-border incursion. It comes as the Red Cross confirms the deaths of 3 aid workers killed by Russian shelling in the eastern Donetsk. Rani Hayman reports.
5 weeks after Ukraine infiltrated Russia's eastern border, Moscow says it's recapturing territory after Kyiv's surprise incursion last month.
The Russians have begun counter-offensive actions. It goes according to our Ukrainian plan.
But within Ukraine, Russia continues to gain ground, pushing further into the Sumy region with energy infrastructure targeted. South in the Donetsk region, 3 workers for the International Committee of the Red Cross were killed in a strike. The aid agency hasn't said who it believes is behind the attack, but Ukraine has accused Russia of committing a war crime. It comes as US Secretary of State Antony Blinken finished a multi-country trip focused on the war.
What we learn from our Ukrainian partners will inform discussions that we'll be having with other allies.
We should continue to deliver advanced air defence systems and also, in our opinion, lift restrictions on the use of long-range weapons.
The question of whether the US will change its mind to allow Ukraine to use Western-supplied long-range weapons against targets inside Russia could soon be answered. British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer is on his way to meet US President Joe Biden at the White House.
This will mean that NATO countries, the United States and European countries are fighting Russia.
A warning, a change of strategy from the West would lead to dangerous escalation on the battlefield. Rani Hayman, ABC News, London.
US Vice President Kamala Harris has challenged Donald Trump to another televised debate, saying they owe it to the voters. With 54 days to go until the American election in November, Democrat VP Harris narrowly leads the polls. Debates between presidential candidates are typically an important part of the US election process. But Trump says he will not participate in another one after facing President Joe Biden back in June and then Harris earlier this week. He insists he won the Philadelphia showdown, which is watched by more than 67 million people.
As everyone saw 2 nights ago, we had a monumental victory over Comrade Kamala Harris. So because we've done 2 debates and because they were successful, there will be no third debate.
Bruce Lemon's lawyers have filed an updated appeal claim against the ruling by a federal court judge, Michael Lee, that on the balance of probabilities he did rape Brittany Higgins at Parliament House in 2019. Bruce Lemon filed the first appeal notice himself after losing his defamation case against Network 10 over an interview with Ms Higgins. His version challenged key parts of the ruling, but now his lawyers have broadened that to include the whole judgment. They will argue Justice Lee's ruling on the truth defence was not the same as the truth case argued by 10. Mr Lemon has maintained his innocence, with his criminal trial abandoned with no findings against him. The ex-girlfriend of an alleged serial killer has told the SA Supreme Court that he said he'd bury her if she opened her mouth after witnessing one of the alleged murders. Stephen Leslie Hainsworth is facing trial for murdering 3 people over a 13-year period.
This is the Mount Gambier home where police allege Stephen Leslie Hainsworth bashed to death Stephen Newton in 2011. The court heard the pensioner's body was found several weeks after the alleged killing, with rubbish and cannabis strewn over his body. His home had been ransacked. Mr Hainsworth is also accused of murdering Phyllis Harrison in 1998 and Beverly Hanley in 2010 in Adelaide. The court previously heard he was allegedly motivated by stealing and selling off valuables in each alleged victim's home. The accused ex-girlfriend giving evidence on Friday, saying she attended Mr Newton's home with the accused, saying, "We knocked on the door. Steve Hainsworth put his foot in the door. Mr Newton grabbed my hair. There was a scuffle." She said she saw Mr Hainsworth bash the alleged victim's head and later observed he wasn't breathing. Telling the court, the accused said he needed to return to Mr Newton's home to clean up the evidence. "He told me not to open my mouth or we'd go to the Pines," she told the court. When asked if she feared the accused, Ms Evans said yes, because he had already murdered someone, he could do it again. Under cross-examination, Mr Hainsworth's defence lawyer put to the witness that the accused's threats to bury her in the Pines was actually related to suspicions she'd been cheating on him, and that she'd seen Mr Hainsworth's friend murder Mr Newton. Miss Evans disagreed with both submissions. The trial continues. Evelyn Leckie, ABC News, Adelaide.
There's a feeling of uncertainty and frustration in Whyalla as the South Australian town grapples with more job losses. The state government says it's working frantically with steelworks owner GFG Alliance to ensure the town continues to have a strong future.
John O'Halloran sells cleaning products in Whyalla. He doesn't sell directly to the town's steelworks or mines, but says recent job losses are having a knock-on effect.
Look, there's a high level of uncertainty and rightly so. People depend on that steelworks directly and indirectly.
On the streets, a similar sentiment.
Yeah, I think everyone's really stressed and nervous about what's going to happen.
Concerns have been growing in the community over recent months. Yesterday, it was announced that 116 jobs will go next month at iron ore mines linked to the steelworks owner GFG Alliance. That follows 56 miners being let go in May, while 48 people were retrenched at the steelworks last month. And the company has also admitted it's reducing cost on maintenance and met with union officials today to discuss the issue. The state government says it's been in regular contact with GFG.
To make sure that this city continues to thrive and grow. They're going through a tough time and the government is working behind the scenes frantically.
A community forum has been planned for this Sunday in Whyalla by State MP Frank Pangello to give people a chance to get together and discuss their concerns. Mr Pangello told Parliament this week that GFG owes key contractors about $100 million. But long-time local Ian Worth says he's seen problems in the industry before. He's holding hope the town will survive.
I feel very concerned for the people that have lost their jobs and the other people that are worried. At the end of the day, I believe this is a hiccup.
Whether it is just another hiccup remains to be seen. Arj Gannison, ABC News.
Australian children from regional areas are being forced to wait months and travel thousands of kilometres for urgent dental care. Fewer private hospitals are offering the procedures and public wait lists are blowing out.
She might be smiling now, but 4-year-old Mia Van Leeuwen from Biloela in central Queensland suffered severe toothache for 3 months.
She was in pain. She couldn't eat properly or brush her teeth. It caused great discomfort to her and it was hard to get her to brush her teeth.
Before having dental crowns implanted under general anaesthetic in hospital, her family's only option was to travel 400 kilometres to Hervey Bay.
Massive, because we have no family support, so it means that both Sam and I have to take time off our jobs and stay for three days just to get the treatment done for Mia.
Dr. Tim Keys says he's the only private paediatric dentist north of the Sunshine Coast.
We got patients that have flown down from Darwin, from Cairns, they drove, for example, from Biloela, and this is quite a common occurrence.
Dentists say hospitals are cutting back on oral services.
So the access issue that we see now, we're actually at a crisis point.
Day hospitals say funding models used by insurers puts further pressure on the system.
A procedure that might take 5 minutes or 10 minutes, a very simple procedure, compared to one that could take 4 or 5 hours, they're paid exactly the same.
Dentists have renewed calls to have general anaesthetic covered by the Child Dental Benefit Scheme, but accessibility remains a problem due to hospital lists and overcrowding. Mia's family says children shouldn't have to wait.
I believe that dentistry should be funded in some way because it's, for many people, it's out of reach.
James Taylor, ABC News, Hervey Bay.
A new documentary following 4 female Tiwi Islands AFL hopefuls over 6 years has opened in Darwin's International Film Festival. The film, called Like My Brother, explores what it takes and what it costs to chase a dream.
While the Tiwi Islands are known for producing hotshot male footballers, the road for female players is far less travelled, but not for a lack of talent.
You would have been quicker than any other girl that was in the draft. So imagine if you had a fancy indoor stadium and you were wearing shoes.
A film crew follows 4 young Tiwi women as they leave the challenges of home life in the Northern Territory.
Here, like, we do have a gym, but like the dingoes have eaten the cushion off the bench press.
Chasing their dreams to Melbourne to play in the Victorian Football League, with the crew documenting the many hurdles they have to jump.
Systemic racism, pathways that are insecure, pathways that are there and then dragged away. So what this film is really, the biggest story is about who has the privilege to dream.
But also capturing the many triumphs the girls experience along the way. And then bringing it all together in a film that breaks boundaries and opens doors.
It's a good experience to see on TV, on screen, to say, you know, like, these guys lived away from home. How can we be like these guys?
For every great footy player we see out playing, there's 10 to 20 more of the same calibre in community, and we really need to unlock these pathways.
The film releases in cinemas around the country on October 17, but before that it's made its way home to the top end, opening Darwin's International Film Festival last night.
So that's what made it so special. You know, this is where the story began, and it's a full circle moment to be a part of that audience last night.
A remarkable true story about 4 girls who dared to dream. Isabella Tolhurst, ABC News, Darwin.
Record-breaking rains have turned WA's Midwest into a sea of colour as wildflowers bloom. It's great news for tourists and the regional economy.
An organic carpet of colour has transformed the Midwest on a big scale. The number of flowers in the Geraldton and Mullawa region this year has defied a serious lack of rain.
In the last 2 years, we've been able to double the amount of orchids we've seen. The main orchids here are the spider orchids, and then we've found in the last couple of years 2 different types of spider orchids, as well as leek orchids, the shell orchids, little green hoods. So it's just amazing.
Flower lovers and farmers were equally worried about low rainfall until the skies opened in late June.
Farmers were thinking they weren't going to get any crops at all. I was thinking we weren't going to get any wildflowers.
The timing of the end-of-season rain created perfect conditions for a rare rainbow reaction.
We didn't even see it coming, and we ended up getting 300 mils of rain in 1 month. Because the rain came quite late, we now have all the different colours at once, which is really unusual.
An abundance of colour is drawing so many people to the region this year, and businesses are happy to report that they're being run off their feet, which is good news for tourists, but even better for local business owners.
We're seeing in excess of 200 people a day sometimes. I was looking back at August 23, and I think the most we got in a day was about 100 people through our doors. So we've had people from Canada, New Zealand, Europe. It's really lovely to show them what WA has to offer.
As the weather dries, the opportunity to see these floral treasures will soon close. But where there's a will, there's a way. Piper Duffy, ABC News, Mullawa.
Port Adelaide has survived a late charge by Hawthorn, prevailing in a nail-biting do-or-die semi-final. Port started on fire for 3 consecutive goals from free kicks, allowed Hawthorn to get back into the contest. The Hawks almost managed to get over the line, but just fell short, Port winning 75-72. Port Adelaide will face Sydney next weekend for a spot in the grand final. Meanwhile, it seems the AFL career of Richmond champion Dustin Martin might not yet be over. It comes as the Lions head to Sydney ahead of a knockout semi-final against GWS on Saturday.
The last time the Lions travelled interstate to play the Giants, it didn't end well. A 54-point loss saw Brisbane's season hanging by a thread.
Our second half probably wasn't up to scratch in terms of standards and whatnot, so that was disappointing.
But the Lions turned their fortunes around to finish fifth and are now a premiership threat. There's a sense of deja vu for Josh Dunkley, who won an unlikely flag with the Western Bulldogs in 2016 after the club finished 7th.
There's so many similarities to what I've felt in 16 and even 21 at the Dogs. We finished 5th that year and went on to make a grand final, so not looking too far ahead, but hopefully, tomorrow night goes well.
Tom Papley's focus is tonight. The Swans will play the winner of the Hawks and the Power.
I'll be glued to the TV tonight. I love footy.
And he loves the Hawks too.
I think just the energy they bring, looks like they're just having fun out there.
He praised the Hawks' small forward brigade, with Nick Watson and Jack Ginnivan leading the celebrations.
He's good for the game, he's a character. It's just Ginny.
And it might not be the end for one of the game's greatest. The Suns have met with Dustin Martin to work out whether the Brownlow medalist is a good fit. Martin retired as a Tiger at the end of the home and away season, but has long been linked to the Suns, led by Martin's former coach, Damien Hardwick. Tom Maddox, ABC News.
Australia remains unbeaten in the group stage of the Davis Cup finals after defeating Czechia 3-0 in Valencia. Thanasi Kokkinakis won the opening match over Jakub Mensik. Alexei Poprin then secured victory for Australia after Tomas Mahac retired hurt. Max Purcell and Matthew Ebden finished the clean sweep with a 6-4, 6-2 win over Mensik and Adam Pavlicek in the doubles. Australia faces Spain on Sunday. Taking a look around the country tomorrow in Brisbane, partly cloudy and 23. For Sydney, a mostly sunny day, forecast top of 24. In Canberra, early frost and a late shower or two, 18 the forecast top. In Melbourne, showers becoming windy and 12 degrees. In Hobart, showers and 11. In Adelaide, partly cloudy and 17. For Perth, a sunny day and 27 degrees. That's ABC Late News. I'm Craig Smart. Thanks for your company. Good night.